In the 54th week of the restored democratic government of New Zealand, Science Minister Judith announced a cut to humanities funding from the Marsden Fund. The Marsden Fund distributes around $77 million of our taxpayer funds every year. The Minister of Research, Science and Innovation has high-level ministerial oversight of the fund and can therefore set which categories of research the funding is available to. As you would expect, during the Ardern Marxist era, the Marsden Fund was hijacked by far-left radicals and ethno-grifters to distribute millions of dollars of your taxpayer funds on projects aimed at promoting ethno-victimhood groups and promulgating radical left propaganda under the name of science and humanities. In reaction to the funding cuts, the Marxist ideologues from the halls of academia have crawled out of their sweaty cubbyholes to have a tantrums and a whinge about their grift being taken away. They call me the ever-optimist, but I always give them the benefit of the doubt and try to understand the objections from the radical left perspective. So let me introduce our first objector, Dr. Panamu Jade Aikman. I'm just going to call him Jade. Jade is a radicalised left-wing doctor of Maori something or other and an ethnocentric researcher. He received a grant of $300,000 of our money from the Marsden Fund a few years ago. This project was aimed at raising the ethno-wokery levels of the New Zealand police. Jade wasn't happy about the funding cut announced by our esteemed and experienced Science Minister. He reflected on his own project as the basis for his objection. Now, I always enjoy reading a good study, especially a study done on a humanities subject. I know it's going to hurt, but I just can't help myself. How I approach these studies is to go to the executive summary first. And if the summary rises above the level of incoherent academic word salad, that'll be a good start. Let's see whether it does. The summary opens with reference to the design of a thing called policing delivery. I think that's what normal people just call policing. And this is what it says. So this policing delivery should be designed with a focus on building towards fair and equitable outcomes for all, and for especially Maori and Pasifika communities. So from the outset, Jade thinks that you can provide fair and equitable outcomes by directing special attention to specific groups which he misrepresents as communities, instead of what they clearly are, which is ethnic identity groups, while of course directing less attention to the excluded ethnic groups. In other words, policing people of Polynesian race preferentially compared to people of Caucasian race. You'd be forgiven for thinking that you've heard that racist agenda from someone else recently. This is the level of intellectual thinking from a doctor, a professional researcher who received $300,000 of our money from the Marsden Fund. We paid Dr. Jade to sit in an office for 2 years to produce an opening paragraph and an executive summary that amounts to racist oxymoronic gibberish. I won't torture you by going any further into Jade's masterpiece of anti-white racist claptrap. I'm sure you can imagine where it goes. There's a link to our $300,000 investment in the description below if you're feeling masochistic. There's little doubt that this Marxist manifesto would have been dispatched into the bin along with Andy's rainbow flag when they sent Spotless into Molesworth Street to fumigate his vacant office. So, sorry, but your $300,000 investment in how the police can be even more ethno-woke is now more than likely redundant. As for Jade's opinion piece, also linked below, here's an example of why you shouldn't read it. Science can show us the how, but the humanities give us the what and why. Funding one without the other is like sailing without a compass. You can move forward, but without direction or purpose. We lose more than we gain.
What can be, unburdened by what has been.
Apparently, Jade, you've also forgotten that your Maori and Pasifika communities, as you call them, have been navigating the Pacific Ocean for hundreds of years in sailing vessels without having a compass. Your analogy therefore amounts to a word salad platitude. What you spent 2 years and $300,000 of our money studying, Jade, was the lack of any evidence to debunk what the rest of us call common sense. Obviously there's no point in ruminating any further over Jade's nonsensical racist claptrap, so let's meet our second objector. Let me introduce another doctor of something or other, Tom Baker. Tom wrote a similar dissenting opinion piece for the Newsroom website. Now in Tom's photo he appears to be a regular stale pale male, so I thought that I might be able to make more sense of the academic objections if I read his contribution. Basically what Tom argues is that cuts to humanities research funding stifles critical review of social issues, and that allows the government to avoid inconvenient conclusions. Now on the surface that objection seems perfectly reasonable. However, what that overlooks is that Tom's characterisation is synonymous with controlling the narrative, and it's equally the case that the government can control the narrative by providing funding, as long as the research funded gives the answers wanted. Tom acknowledges as much in his opinion piece by citing, when Keith Joseph, the UK Secretary of Education, wanted to scrap the Social Science Research Council in the 1980s, his motive was clear enough, reportedly saying, "I'll start funding your research when you give me the findings I want to hear." So for example, the funding received by Jude for his project would suit the identity politics agenda of the Marxist Ardern regime, and so the Marsden Fund would likely approve his funding. When you look at the counterfactual like this, it completely negates the logical basis for Tom's objection. Funding, whether zero or more than zero, is always a mechanism that can be used to control the narrative promulgated by academia, whether convenient or inconvenient. What you're saying, Dr. Tom, is that it's better to fund results that you do want to hear, rather than defund results that you don't want to hear. That objection is incoherent and plainly not an argument on which you can justify receiving taxpayer funding. The left have been funding preferred results like that for the last 6 years. That's how Jade and others were paid to study nothing of any real moment and write their racist diatribes. Sorry, Tom, but the logic of your objection fails. But before moving on, the thing that most concerned me about Tom's opinion piece was his lack of candour by not disclosing his status as a former elected councillor of the organisation that administers the Marsden Fund. I think that position gives colour to his opinion piece and should have been disclosed. In the process of trying to understand the radical left opposition to the Marsden Fund exclusion of humanities research funding, hours of online research has turned up nothing of substance. Not one concrete example where humanities research has provided anything of utility to the taxpayers who are forced to foot the bill. All of the objections can be boiled down to meaningless word salad. All in all, I've not found a single objection to the funding cut that meets the criteria of being coherent, rational, and valid. Judith Collins should be applauded for her decision to crush the funding of academic wokery in favour of economically beneficial scientific research. In other news, Winston Peters has announced that gender ideology indoctrination has been removed from the school curriculum. Teachers will be required to stop grooming children from term 1 of next year. This creates a competitive situation for the Prime Ministership at the next election. Will it be Winston Peters, or instead David Seymour, who will be New Zealand's next Prime Minister? What do you think of the state of our university? What are your thoughts on funding academic research for socialist wokery? Please do leave me a comment, let me know your position on these issues. I appreciate reading your views. At the risk of sounding like the modern equivalent of a broken record, whatever that is nowadays, remember the deadline for submissions on the Treaty Principles Bill is the 7th of January in the new year. Don't get all carried away with the festive season and forget to make a submission. I can guarantee you that the ethno-radicals will be all over that, so we must be diligent. Nothing less than our country and democracy is at stake. There's a link in the description below. Thanks for watching. Give us a like, would you, and click subscribe to be notified of new content as it drops. See you next time.